Okay, once again, good morning, all of you. Today is the 29th class. I just now checked it. It is the 29th class today. And we are on the verge of completing learning JavaScript. JavaScript, as I told you, is a client-side scripting language which has an application of doing client-side validation. And why do we do client-side validation is because before we submit the data to the server, we need to check whether everything is proper or no. For example, if my form contains a text field which is asking you to enter your name, then we have to check whether the name is valid. In the sense, name should not contain any digits. So these type of validation, we can do it on the client side only. If we are asking the user to enter his phone number, is the user trying to enter the correct phone number or no? Because phone numbers can contain only digits, it cannot contain text. So that validation also we can check. So like this, there are different types of validation. We have number validation, we have empty field validation, email address validation. A lot of things are there. And I checked now that we had written one program here like this last time to check if the entered data is a proper phone number or no, and all that, So we have done this already in the last class. Let us go further and try to see what this is the end of the chapter where we have finished learning JavaScript. And what all we have studied in JavaScript, we have seen the syntax of JavaScript. These are the questions which you can refer to for JavaScript. I will give you questions from my side also, okay, for these coming internals now. So this is the end of JavaScript. Remember, in the examination, they will ask you a lot of questions on JavaScript, and in our web technology lab also, there are a lot of term works which are based on JavaScript. Okay, so once the college starts after the second I, when people will be coming here, we will completely concentrate on the lab. We will completely concentrate on the lab, and we will try to finish the term works of web lab, and similarly the other labs also. Okay, that is what we will do. Now, in this subject here, if we have finished learning JavaScript events, forms, server side, now we have to learn introduction to server side development with PHP. This is what we have to start. Now that JavaScript is over, we have to start with introduction to server side development using PHP. First of all, we have to understand what is server side development, and then what are the responsibilities of a web server. Then immediately we have to jump into coding with PHP. We have to learn the syntax of writing PHP code, where to save it, how to run it, all that we have to see. And finally, we have to understand how the HTML is connected with PHP, and how data, when it is submitted from HTML, it is received by PHP and all that. So basically, first we have to understand what is the meaning of server-side development with PHP. We already have this here in this textbook. I'll just go to the index directly, and from there I will jump to the chapter of PHP. (322), so I can just take that and I can go to page. How do I go to that page? Okay. So this is it. This is the chapter. This is chapter number 8 according to the textbook, and we are learning introduction to server-side development with PHP. Okay. Now, before we actually jump to this particular code here and try to understand this diagram, I will go back to my diagram, which I always used to share with you. And I said that this is the diagram that I always show to the students when this is the one. I came back to this diagram. This diagram is what I had shown you when we had started learning web technologies. In this diagram here, we have two entities. We have the client and we have the server. And then The communication between the client and the server happens using HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And I told you a few things about the server, that on the server there are resources, there are documents which the client will request for. Client will request for these documents by typing a URL in the address bar of the browser. The client can request two different types of documents from the server, or in other words, I can say that the server contains two different types of documents: static documents and dynamic documents. Static documents are those documents which are with extension .html, .htm, .xml, .mp3, video files, audio files, text files. These are PDF files. These are all static content. Any file with extension .php, JSP, ASP, these are all dynamic pages, which means that any page that needs to first execute on the server are all dynamic pages. Dynamic pages or dynamic content or dynamic documents are written using some server-side scripting language. What is first the definition of a server-side script? A server-side script is the one which executes on the server in simple terms. From the name itself, it is clear that server-side scripting languages or server-side script is the one which executes on the server. On the other hand, what is a client-side script? A client-side script is the one which executes on the client. Please remember this. This is very, very important. So a server-side script is written using some languages like PHP. If you are good with Java, you can write your server-side script using Java. If you want your server-side script to be written using let us say PHP, you can write it using PHP. Java, you can also use Python. Now that depends upon the choice of the developer and the infrastructure available. Now we are going to learn PHP as part of this subject, so we will be writing our dynamic pages or our server-side scripting using PHP. PHP is a language which is used for writing server-side scripts. These pages are saved on the server with extension .php. PHP is just like any other programming language which has the concept of declaring variables, conditional statements, looping statements, functions. It has all the features of a programming language. Using PHP, we can do a lot of things. We can process data in different forms. We can process data, we can save it to the database, which means that from PHP, I can make connection to the database. With PHP, I can open flat files, text files to write some data into it, to read some data from it. So PHP can be used for various things. We will step by step see exactly how to do all that. One thing to remember is that if I have saved a PHP file, on my server, I can request it in the same way how I used to request my HTML pages, my PDF files, my MP3 files, like that, by typing the URL in the address bar and requesting it. Okay, so I can request PHP, I can tell the server to execute. Now, one thing which I told you when I started with this is that when a static page is requested by the client, the request goes to the server simply picks up that file from the server and sends it back to the client's machine if a static page is requested. But when a dynamic page is requested, remember the page first is executed on the server machine and the result of that execution is sent to the client's machine. Every time I request the dynamic page, every time the server executes that page, and then the result of that is sent to the client's machine. This is what you have to understand and remember. Now coming back to the textbook here, what happens is, let us look at this scenario. This is client side. This example will explain to you the difference between a client side script and server side scripting. In the client side scripting, what happens is, this is the user. The user will request for a page of HTML which contains a little bit of JavaScript. That page with JavaScript comes to the client's machine, and on the client's machine, you can see that execute any JavaScript as required. So on the client's machine, the JavaScript executed, and then display that to the browser. This is what happens in case of a client-side scripting execution. Now look at this for a server-side execution. In a server-side execution, same scenario, you have a client here, you have a server here, and you have the browser. The client will request for a PHP page. PHP code is requested, resource is executed. So you can see that page is executed, PHP page is executed, and the output from the PHP execution, the output of the PHP execution is sent to the client's machine. Now, instead of I telling the output is sent to the client machine, it will be better if I say that the output from the PHP machine, the output from the server machine after executing PHP is sent to the client machine. Okay, so instead of saying the result of execution is sent to the client machine, it will be better if I say the output from the server is sent to the client machine. And it is received by the browser and the browser displays it on itself. This is very important. Please remember, the PHP file is requested, the PHP code is executed on the server, the output of the PHP execution is sent to the client's machine and the browser displays it. This is server side execution. Okay, the same thing which I told you. Now let us go further. Let us try to understand what all things can PHP do. It can do database connectivity. Okay, it can connect to any database. PHP can connect to MySQL, it can connect to Microsoft SQL Server, it can connect to Oracle, it can connect to all different types of databases. But the combination of PHP with a database is always with MySQL because it gels up properly. PHP gels up very nicely with MySQL, so always at the back end MySQL is used, but it depends upon the requirement and it depends upon what resources you have. But the most commonly used database with PHP is MySQL. Then PHP can be used to process XML. XML also can be used in PHP, which means that PHP is capable of parsing XML documents and creating XML documents and all that. Okay. And PHP code, what all it can do is PHP code has access to database. PHP code has access to web services. PHP has got access to files. PHP can send emails. PHP can communicate with other software. So basically, this is what a PHP can do. PHP can do all these things. It can do database connectivity. It can request a web service. It can, I told you, it can open text files. It can write to text files and all that. It can send emails. It can send SMSs. It can do a lot of things. Actually, we will see step by step what all it can do. So right now, remember what all PHP is capable of. PHP is capable of doing all these things. Now, comparing server-side technologies, I told you that you can write your server-side script using any programming language. You can use ASP, active server pages. What is ASP? ASP is active server pages. It is similar to PHP. What PHP can do, ASP can do. ASP is a Microsoft technology, and the programming language that we use to write ASP pages is VB script. VB script. We use VB script for writing ASP pages. So please remember that. Anyhow, we're not going to learn ASP as such, but you should know which are the other competitors or alternatives of PHP. ASP is one of them. Then you have ASP.NET, which is an advanced version of ASP. Now, since ASP uses Visual Basic VB script, which is an older programming language, ASP.NET uses C#. ASP.NET uses C#, but again, ASP.NET is a Microsoft technology. Then which are the other languages which I can use for writing my dynamic pages is I can use Java server pages, that is JSP. I can use JSP to write my server-side script. Then I can use Node.js also, in which I use JavaScript as a programming language to write my server-side script. Then I can use Perl. Of course, I can use PHP. I can use Python. I can use Ruby on Rails. So these are some of the technologies which are alternatives to PHP. Alternatives to PHP. If I'm not using PHP, then I can use any of these languages to write my server-side scripts. Now, the one thing that comes to your mind right now is, so then in that case, why do we have so many options? Why not only one? Or maybe you have a question like, when to use which technology? Now, this completely depends upon what is your choice. If there is, let us say, a Java programmer, okay, a hardcore Java programmer who has got a lot of experience with Java, and if he or she would want to write a server-side script or want to write a web application, so in that case, that person would definitely go for Java server pages, JSP, because when you write code in JSP, you have to use the Java programming language. If let us say there is a hardcore programmer of VB, Visual Basic, a person who has spent a lot of time on VB, and if he or she needs to write dynamic pages, let us say if he or she needs to write dynamic pages, okay, and if he is a hardcore programmer of VB script, then he would definitely go for ASP. Okay, if suppose somebody knows C# very nicely, and if they need to write dynamic pages, they would want to go for ASP.NET. Similarly, if anybody is good with Python, they will go for Python. If there is anybody good with Perl, they will go for Perl. If anybody is good, very good with JavaScript, they will go for Node.js. Now, at this point of time here, Node.js, you will be a little confused as to, sir, we saw that on the client side also we used JavaScript and on the server side also. Yes, of course, JavaScript can be used, or we can write code in JavaScript which can execute on the server machine also. But the way of writing it, the way of deploying it is completely different. We don't write this code in between HTML pages. If you want any JavaScript code to be executed on the client's machine, then you have to write it between HTML tags that we saw all this time. Okay, you can see this example here. This is how we write if you want JavaScript to execute on the client's machine. But if you want it to execute on the server, then there is a different way of doing it. We use Node.js for that. Okay, so these are the different alternatives. Just remember them. Remember them. What is the full form of this? Which company started and which is the programming language you use? And then you can write a few things about that if you know. In the examination, they may or they may not ask you this question. Not very important. Okay. One thing to understand is, then you will ask me a question. So that's about it. If you are comfortable with a particular programming language, then we can start writing our programs. That is not the only thing that is required. For example, let us say now to run a server-side script, you need to install a special software on the machine. If you want to make your machine as a server and you want to keep some documents or some pages on your machine, then you have to install a special software on your machine to make it as a server. And that server, when you install that software, will be called as a web server. If you want your machine, your computer, your laptop to work as a server on which you would want to keep some static pages and some dynamic pages and all that, and you want people to request pages from your machine, from your server, just like how we were doing all this time, then you have to install a software on your machine that is called as a web server software. And when you install this web server software, only then you can keep your HTML pages, your PHP pages, and then your server will be able to execute PHP files and send it to the clients, whoever is requesting it. Now you will ask me a question. Sir, if I want to create my dynamic pages using ASP, then do I have to install the same web server software? No. If you want to write your dynamic pages using ASP, you need a different web server. You need a different web server software. If you want to write your dynamic pages using PHP, you need a different web server. If you want to write your dynamic pages using JSP, then you need a different web server, which means that these web server softwares are different for different programming languages. If you wish to write your dynamic pages using PHP, then the web server should be Apache, WAMP, which we call it as WAMP on Windows, or LAMP on the Linux. Which means that if you want to write your dynamic pages using PHP, then the web server software or the web server that you have to install is WAMP in your machine, WAMP, W-A-M-P. If you want your dynamic pages to be written using ASP, then you need to install a different web server, and the name of that web server is IIS, Internet Information Server. If you want your dynamic pages to be written using JSP, then you have to install Tomcat web server, which is capable of serving JSP pages. All these web servers are different. They are capable of running their own programming languages. WAMP web server is capable of running PHP. IIS is capable of running ASP and ASP.NET. Apache Tomcat is capable of running JSP. Then there is a framework called as Flask, which is capable of running Python server-side scripts. So it depends upon which programming language you are using, and you have to install that particular web server. You cannot install only one and put all your dynamic pages on that server and expect it to serve it to the clients. No, it will not do that. So I hope it is clear. It is very important that you understand this part. It's very important. I will just conclude this statement by saying that if you write your dynamic pages or your documents which you would want to keep it on the server using different programming languages like JSP, ASP, PHP, or Python, you need to install different web servers. Different web servers are there which you have to install. So that's why, people, when they want to work with only PHP, they install WAMP web server. They will not install all other web servers, and hence they will not be writing their dynamic pages using JSP or other technologies. They will write their dynamic pages using only PHP because the server they have installed is WAMP. Okay, after you have installed the WAMP web server, after you have installed the WAMP web server on Windows platform, this is how it appears. Okay, this is, I think, not there in the syllabus. Let us see that further, but I will tell you that when we install the WAMP server, for example, I have it here in my softwares folder. I have a WAMP server here. Okay, so this is a server that I have installed. This is only 15 MB. So when I double clicked on that, I just said next, next, next. It got installed, and after it got installed, it comes in the C drive. In the C drive here, it will create a folder called as WAMP. You can see it creates a folder here called as WAMP. If I double click on that, there is a folder called as www, and this is where you are supposed to keep all your web pages. You are supposed to keep all your web pages here in this folder. Which folder? In the C drive, there is a folder called as WAMP, which is automatically created after you have installed WAMP on your machine. Inside that, there is a folder called as www. You have to keep all your PHP files, your HTML files in this folder only. Only then the server will be capable of serving this. Otherwise, it will not be capable of serving this. Now, there is an alternate to WAMP. There is a new version of Apache Web Server on the Windows platform. It is called as XAMP, XAMP, XAMP we call it as. You can even install that. You can even install that. After you have installed that XAMP, it will come in the C drive only as XAMP. You go there, and there will be a folder called as, I think there will be a folder called as htdocs or www. Inside www, finally there will be a folder called as htdocs. In case if you have installed XAMP in your machine, you have to keep all your HTML pages and PHP pages in htdocs folder. But since I have installed WAMP here, in WAMP, if you have installed, then you have to go to www. Here you have to keep all your HTML and you have to keep all your PHP files. And once you have kept all your PHP files and HTML files over here, then you can start the server. If I go there and if I say WAMP, and then there'll be an icon here because I've installed WAMP. If I click on that start WAMP server, then it will ask me whether you want to really start. I say yes, start, and then it starts here, and then it goes here to the taskbar. Here you can see in the taskbar here, you can see that WAMP server is running. You can see that WAMP server is running. If I click on that, I will get this menu items and all that. Okay, so I can click that. I can get all that. So I have started the WAMP server. Now I can go to the browser here, and then I can go to my browser and type localhost. If I click localhost, then it will display me the first page of WAMP server. This appeared by typing localhost. Why did I type localhost? I typed localhost because my browser, my client, and my server is on the same machine. So that's why I said, please give me the first page of this WAMP server. So I typed localhost. And all these pages which I was writing all this time here in the web folder. Okay, there was one folder called, one example which I wrote last time was events.html, where I was keeping all these files. I was keeping it here in the D drive in the web folder. Now what I will do is I will copy this events_ex.html. I will copy this and I will paste it in the www folder. I will paste it here in the www folder. Okay, events_ex.html. This is the name of the HTML file. Now I've kept it in the www folder. And now if I want to run that file, then I have to write localhost /events events_ex.html. So when I did that, look at this URL. I typed the IP address of the server / name of the file, events_ex.html. And then if I click something here, if I click on that, then it displays me you have entered valid data. You know, this program, we had written it last time to check whether the entered data is a numeric data or something else. So if I enter some alphabets there, click on that, it says please enter all numbers. So what I'm explaining to you is, if you write your HTML pages and if you write your PHP pages, where to keep it. After you have kept it here in the www folder, where I've kept it directly, you can see that I've kept it in this, my events_ex.html is kept in www folder. If I remove it from here, I will cut this from here, and I will go to a folder there called as notes. Okay, in that www there is a folder called as notes. If I go to notes and if I paste events_ex.html. Now, where is this events underscore? It is not present in the www folder, but it is present in the notes folder. So if I go to my browser here, if I go here and if if I go here and if I type localhost/events_ex, if I refresh this, it will say that it is not found. Not found because this events._ex, this file is no more in the www folder, but it is inside a folder. So if I want to request this file again, localhost/notes/events.html, now you can see that it will come. You understood? Now I've kept it in the notes folder, so I have to put notes in my URL/events_ex.html. This is how I request it. This is how I request the file, because I have kept it in the www notes folder. Here I've kept it here. That's why. So if I create, let us say, one more folder inside notes, if I create one more folder inside notes called as test, and if I keep this events.ex in that test notes, inside notes there is test and then events. So now if I go and refresh this, it will say not found, because where I'm trying to request it from, notes and events dot, it will not come now. If I press enter, it will not come. If I go, sorry, if I go there, if I press enter, it will say not found, because where I'm trying to request it, I'm trying to request it from notes and events_ex.html. If I want that, now I have to type what? I have to type notes/test/events.ex. So you can see that it appears. So I hope you understood exactly where to keep the files, and how to request it. If I keep my files directly in the www folder, then I have to go to the browser and type localhost/name of the file.html. Now, since this event ex HTML is not present in the www folder, so that's why it is saying not found. The server will say, I'm not able to find the file which you are requesting for, because of course it is not present there. In notes, there is a test. In test, there is this. So I remove that. I come to www. I paste it here directly in www, and I refresh this. Now you will see it will come. Okay. So this is how you request HTML pages, and similarly, you can request your PHP pages also like that. Now let me write the first PHP file. How to write PHP is we write it like this. I will explain you the syntax of PHP in the next class. We will start. And I print hello from my first PHP page. That's it. I have written my first PHP page. Very simple. Whenever we write PHP, we always write it in this delimiter. We start by writing a less than sign, question mark, and then PHP, and then all the PHP statements we write it inside this delimiter. And then if you want to close the PHP tag, then you have to enter question mark and then greater than sign, and then you have to close. So all PHP statements, all PHP will have to be written between these delimiters. So you have PHP here, close the PHP, and all PHP code will be written here. So this is a simple print statement of PHP. I save the program. Where I'm supposed to save this, I have to save it in my computer C drive, WAMP, www, and then here I will save my PHP. Okay, so I will write here testing.php. Okay, so the name of the file is testing.php. So if I go back here, then I can write testing.php. It says not found. Why? Because TESTINGR by mistake I have written here. I have to, the spelling mistake. So I removed that R. Now it is testing.php. Enter. Yeah, now you can see the output. Hello from my first PHP page. If you're able to see this, it means that your PHP is running perfectly without any problems. Your PHP is running perfectly without any problems. You can see that. Okay. So this is how we write PHP and execute PHP. You simply cannot save it wherever you want. I cannot now, do this. If I go to www, this is testing.php. I copy that and I come to my web folder, which is in the D drive. I paste my PHP file here. Okay. Now I cannot keep it anywhere here and there. I cannot keep it here and there, my PHP file, and I cannot request it. HTML still you can keep it wherever you want. You can double click and then it executes. HTML always opens in the browser, so you can execute it from anywhere. Even from D drive you can execute HTML. But if you want your server to serve HTML, then you have to keep all these HTML pages where? In the www folder, in WAMP folder, which is in the C drive. Okay, but PHP pages, you cannot just double click and open it and execute. No, that is not possible. If you want to execute PHP in your laptop, in your computer, make sure that you always keep this PHP file in the C drive, in the C drive, in the WAMP folder, in the www folder. Here you have to keep it wherever you want. You can directly keep it in the www folder, or you can create a folder with your name or USA number, whatever it is, and then you can keep your files there. But wherever you store it, you should know how to request it on the browser. Localhost you have to type, localhost / name of the file .php if you have kept it directly into the www folder. If you have created a folder with your USA number, then after localhost, the folder name should come, and then / and then the name of the file. Okay, I hope this is clear. I have seen many people actually doing this mistake. So install that web server on your laptops and start working with this simple PHP files, because in the process of learning PHP, there are some term works that we have to write as part of the web lab. I will be demonstrating the web lab term works on Windows. So you can practice it in your computer, because exams will definitely be there, lab exams, and then it will be better if you can practice all that. Okay, so this is about PHP. I have not started teaching you the syntax of PHP. Again, let me tell you, I have not started teaching the syntax of PHP. I just told you introduction, what all we studied in today's class. We studied what is the meaning of a server-side scripting, what is the difference between server-side script and client-side script. Then we understood which are the different competitors of PHP, alternatives to PHP. And then we studied that if you want to write, we studied that if you want to write your dynamic pages using your programming language of your choice, then you have to install a different web server softwares. For PHP, you have to install WAMP on your machine. That is what you understand right now. If you want to execute ASP, then you require IIS, Internet Information Server. If you want to execute Java JSP, then you have to install Apache Tomcat. If you want to install and run your dynamic pages using Python, then you need to install a framework called as Flask, and so on. Okay, so different web servers for different technologies. That is what we studied. And then we studied exactly how to install WAMP server, where to keep the files, and how to request them. That is very important. Okay, now there are some comparisons here. There are comparisons as to how much part of the world, which all websites use PHP, how many use ASP.NET and all that. So you can see top 50 million sites, 47% of them use PHP. Okay, and then you can see ASP.NET is also used, and then others are used. All that all that is there. What are the responsibilities of the web server responsibilities? Let us see. Yeah, Apache and Linux web server. If you want to use PHP, then you have to install Apache web server. You have to install. I told you WAMP. No, WAMP is Apache web server only. Remember. Apache is capable of running PHP. Then there are some Apache modules and PHP. So this is not very important from examination's point of view. There are a few things like when you install Apache web server, which are the different modules that gets installed. This is the installation procedure and all that. So don't worry much about that. Yeah. Server-side script in the sense like you will ask me a question. Okay, you will ask me a question like, sir, there will be only one server and multiple clients can request at the same time. Let us say I open my browser, I type the URL, somebody else also at the same time will request the URL. So multiple requests will go to the server at the same time. So how will the server respond to this? The server is actually multi-threaded. The programs that we write, it runs in different threads. Okay, so if the client requests for a particular program, the request goes to a it is given to a thread, it executes separately. So remember that for all users, for all requests, different threads execute, which makes it very efficient. Everything is not executed in one thread. For example, let us say 10 clients request the same page at the same time. Now there is not a single thread for the execution. For every request, for every client, there is a separate thread that is created, and your program executes in that thread, and the response comes back from there. So hence it is important that the server has to be very, very powerful, good RAM. It should have good processing power, good processor you should use. All that is very important because your requests execute in different threads. Then what is the meaning of PHP? I told you there is no proper full form of PHP, but it is called as a hypertext preprocessor. Okay, PHP is called as hypertext preprocessor. Now this is how a PHP code executes. When you write PHP, one thing that comes to your mind is that who will do the compilation of the code, who will run the code and all that. Remember the web server which you have installed, whether it is Apache or for other technologies, other server-side scripting languages, other web servers that you install, they are all capable of running their own technologies. Like Apache is definitely capable of running PHP because it will have its compiler also, it will have its runtime environment also, and everything. Okay. So when the PHP code has to be executed, first, the parser will parse the code to see if everything is proper. If there is any syntax errors, immediately the Apache web server will tell you that there is an error in the PHP file, we cannot execute it. Then lexical analyzing happens, then the compiler will compile the code into bytecodes, and then finally the runtime environment will be able to execute your bytecode. Okay, so this is the execution of PHP files. And Apache web server will have all these different modules in it. It will have the parser, it will have the lexer, it will have the compiler, it will have the executor, that is the runtime environment. Okay, so this is about PHP, how it executes. Then there is this installing Apache PHP and MySQL for local development from. Okay, so you have this procedure of how to download it, from where to download, how to install it and all that, which I showed you just now. There is this file which you have to there is this file which you have to download, which is 15 MB only, and install it. If you have installed XAMP, then same it is, double click and install it, and then in the C drive there will be a folder called as XAMP, and then there will be a folder called as htdocs. In that folder you have to keep all your PHP and HTML pages. If you have installed WAMP, then you get a folder called as WAMP. So in C drive WAMP/www, inside that you have to keep your folder, all that files you have to keep it. So we will execute some more PHP files in the next class. 2 minutes are remaining. I will stop here today. Then from tomorrow I'm going to start, maybe after internals only I will start now teaching you people the syntax of PHP. So this is how we start writing PHP. Then we declare variables and all that, where to write PHP, how to save PHP, and how to run PHP. Once again, we will see it in the next class. Okay, so we will stop here today. If you have any doubts, you can please write them down, keep it ready, so next time we can solve them. Okay, so have a nice day, all of you. Bye bye.